Greetings from Soulfire Farm.
We are an Afro-Indigenous centered community farm and training center.
And we are dedicated to uprooting racism and seeding sovereignty in the food system.
We steward 80 acres of land in Mohican territory, upstate New York.
Today, we are thrilled to share Black Earth wisdom with you.
We birthed this project in order to highlight Black ecological thought and practice, both ancestral and contemporary.
We hope this presentation inspires you to deepen your connection with the sacred earth
and to act in solidarity with Afro-Indigenous land stewards.
Enjoy!
In 1887, Dr. George Washington Carver said, "I love to think of nature as unlimited broadcasting stations through which God speaks to us every day, every hour." Dr. Carver was a pioneer in regenerative agriculture as one of the first agricultural scientists in the United States to advocate for the use of leguminous cover crops, nutrient-rich mulching, and diversified horticulture. He awoke in the pre-dawn hours and went to the forest to talk to plants. This is where he received instructions for his work. As Dr. Carver explained, "How do I talk to a little flower? Through it, I talk to the infinite. And what is the infinite? It is that silent, small force, that still, small voice." This practice of earth listening is part of the cultural heritage of Black people. We always begin our storytelling by paying homage to our ancestors. In addition to Dr. Carver, who are some of these revered earth-listening elders? For example, Dr. Wangari Maathai, founder of the Greenbelt movement, who planted over 51 million trees as part of a women's political movement, earning the Nobel Peace Prize. Or Harriet Tubman, herbalist, orchardist, ecologist, and freedom fighter who liberated 70 enslaved people and cured Union soldiers using her deft knowledge of plants and land. And so many more. John Edmondson, lover of birds, who taught taxidermy and ornithology to Charles Darwin. And Dr. Charles Henry Turner, zoologist, who was the first to demonstrate that insects are intelligent beings. Hattie Carthen, tree planter and catalyst for Brooklyn Community Gardens. And of course, Hazel Johnson, community organizer and our mother of the environmental justice movement. Now it's your turn to call your earth-listening ancestors into this space. Call to mind a name you want to honor, and at the count of 3, say it loud into the room. 1, 2, 3.
One of the great challenges of our time is that humanity, by and large, has forgotten how to listen to the earth. We are no longer literate in the languages of the earth, and we no longer understand the kinship bonds we have with nature. Audrey Peterman, Jamaican elder and lover of wild spaces, put this well when she explained that there was once a time when most people could read the night sky. We could tell directionality, seasons, weather, story, and calendar by reading the stars and the clouds. The sky was our primary source. Society has come to rely on secondary and tertiary sources, farther and farther away from the sky in order to get our information. A dangerous and distorted game of telephone yielding scrambled messages. There was a time when we knew to plant corn when the oak leaves were the size of squirrels' ears, says Lenny Sorensen, because the soil was finally thawed and warm. The languages of the earth are many: ice cores, the pH of the ocean, bird song, gravity, tree rings, animal tracks. If I were to tell you I had lived in a neighborhood my whole life and didn't learn the name of the people next door, you might have some judgments on my character. And yet, here we are in a neighborhood of trees, insects, and amphibians that many of us cannot call by name.
What we do not know, we also cannot love, and our kinship bonds weaken. As a young adult, I spent months studying agriculture in Ghana, West Africa, one of my ancestral homelands. My mentors were the Queen Mothers of Manya Krobo, guardians of history, culture, and land. They asked me one day, is it true that in the United States, most farmers put a seed in the ground and they don't pray or dance or sing or pour libations or even say thank you to the seed and they expect it to grow and feed them? When I ashamedly admitted to this, they said, well, no wonder you're all sick. You think the earth is a thing and not a living being. Non-kin thinking is what leads to both racialized oppression and earth ravaging. It is the severing of family and the relegating of others to non-person that makes possible the enactment of violence and oppression on the other. Embedded in the theory of the supremacy of white people over other races is the theory of human supremacy over nature. This non-kin thinking is a uniquely Western invention, as described in 1846 by Senator Thomas Hart Benton, who asserted, "It would seem that the white race alone received the divine command to subdue and replenish the earth, for it is the only race that has obeyed it, the only race that hunts out new and distant lands and even a new world to subdue and replenish."
The consequences of earth illiteracy and non-kin thinking are utter devastation and deep trouble. Species are in trouble. We are currently experiencing the Holocene mass extinction, the most rapid loss of biodiversity in the history of this planet, with 1 million species threatened with extinction in the coming decades. Scientists monitor 21,000 populations of mammals, fish, birds, and amphibians worldwide and have observed a 68% decline in just 25 years. According to Dr. Drew Lanham, there are 3 billion fewer birds singing now than in the last century. Seeds are in trouble. We have lost 75% of the world's crop varieties in the past 100 years. And a proprietary seed market accounts for 82% of the seed supply globally, with Monsanto, Bayer, and DuPont owning the largest shares. Oceans are in trouble. 1 in every 4 people rely on oceans for their livelihood, and more than 90% of global fish stocks are fully exploited or overfished. Agricultural runoff and manufacturing waste has led to over 400 dead zones worldwide, where oxygen levels are so low that all the fish in that area suffocate. Microplastics in our seas now outnumber the stars in our galaxy 500-fold. The climate is in trouble. Soil tillage, deforestation, and the burning of fossil fuels have increased greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, raising Earth's temperature. The glaciers are in retreat, the oceans are acidifying, and the extreme weather events like heat waves, floods, droughts, hurricanes, and tornadoes are increasing in intensity and frequency.
People are in trouble too, and that trouble is not equitably distributed. African American communities continue to be disproportionately burdened with environmental harms like air pollution, flooding, heat exposure, and living in proximity to chemical facilities, power plants, leaded pipes, and trash incinerators. For example, the predominantly African American residents of Louisiana's Cancer Alley are exposed to emissions from 150 oil refineries, chemical facilities, and plastic plants, and experience disproportionately high rates of cancer. And folks like Rashid Lockhart, a formerly incarcerated African American firefighter, are among the thousands of inmates who compose up to 30% of California's wildland firefighting crews. Since the 13th Amendment contains an exclusionary clause permitting slavery as punishment for a crime, Rashid and his fellow inmates were compensated at just 53 cents per hour for their labor. People are also in trouble because they are kept away from nature. We know that green spaces heal. Studies show that hospitalized patients heal when they can see nature, and that people solve problems better after time in the forest. A nationwide study including over 900,000 people revealed that children who grew up with the lowest access to green space had a 55% higher risk of developing a psychiatric disorder. And yet, 74% of communities of color in the contiguous United States live in nature-deprived areas, compared with just 23% of white communities. While Black households once owned 16 million acres of land, 14% of the nation's farms, a combination of USDA discrimination, lynching, and land grabbing, led to nearly complete land loss. Today, 98% of agricultural land is white-owned. These disparities in terms of who is burdened with environmental harms, the earth and racialized people, and who enjoys environmental benefits, predominantly white communities, should come as no surprise. The Western environmental movement is built on a foundation of white supremacy. Take the U.S. National Park System, for example. The 84 million acres of parkland was stolen from Native communities through forced treaty agreements under the genocidal project of Manifest Destiny. Madison Grant was instrumental in creating the Everglades, Olympic, Glacier, and Denali national parks as a way to strengthen the Nordic race. Adolf Hitler referred to Grant's 1916 book, The Passing of a Great Race, as his Bible. The first head of the U.S. Forest Service, Clifford Pinchot, was on the advisory council of the American Eugenics Society and a delegate to the International Eugenics Congress. John Muir, who founded the Sierra Club in 1892, referred to Black and Indigenous people as dirty, lazy, and uncivilized. John James Audubon, famed ornithologist and scientific illustrator and namesake of the Audubon Society, enslaved people and stole human remains for a pseudo-scientific study claiming white superiority. When the National Park Service was founded in 1916, Jim Crow laws and local customs kept Black and brown people on the outside. Even today, despite the fact that 70% of people of color participate in the types of recreational activities offered in national parks, less than 2% of visitors are African American. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King were planning a vacation to Fundry National Park in New Brunswick in 1960, anticipating that a public park in Canada would be a welcome and safe place to seek temporary refuge from the stress and bustle of urban civil rights work. They nonetheless reached out in advance to ensure they would be admitted. Harold D. Wolff, Boston University professor and friend of the Kings, wrote to the park innkeeper saying, "Canada's history being what it is, we are confident you would treat them well, but want to make sure. The friends of whom I speak are a fine Negro minister and his wife." The innkeeper responded, "We feel it would be better not to accommodate your friends."
In the face of big trouble, our people have always risen and resisted. When All-In Corporation dumped 4,000 tons of DDT into the waters of Triana, Alabama, Black residents sued and forced remediation and compensation. Community members resisted the Whispering Pines landfill in Houston, Texas, and the Warren County hazardous waste landfills in North Carolina for the basis of environmental racism. They formed the first National People of Color Environmental Leadership Summit in 1991 and wrote the 17 founding principles of Environmental Justice, which affirmed the sacredness of Mother Earth, decreed discriminatory public policy, and uplifted Native treaty rights, among other provisions. Black farmers rode their tractors on the Mall in D.C., demanding justice for their lost land and farms, suing the federal government for discrimination in the famous Pickford case, and organizing nationally for reparations. Despite prejudice to the contrary, the reality is that people of color are significantly more concerned about climate change than white people are. 49% of white people are concerned, compared to 57% of Black people and 69% of Latinx people. In 1990, when 85% of the public did not even register the notion of global warming, Black journalist Steve Curwood proposed a radio program on the climate. His producers laughed at him and said he would run out of stories in 6 months. Living on Earth is on air to this day.
Like Mr. Curwood, there are many who persist in believing that the land and waters are family members and who act accordingly. Many who are reviving their ancestral and ancient practice of listening to the earth to know which way to go. Black Earth wisdom is a journey of learning from those whose skin is the color of soil, as they share lessons from the earth. I spent the past few years talking with 40 notable Black ecological thinkers, including Alice Walker, Adrienne Maree Brown, Dr. Ross Gay, Dr. Ayana Elizabeth Johnson, Dr. Carolyn Finney, Joshua Bennett, and T. Morgan Dixon. Our time together caused copious tears of reverent joy to fall all over my keyboard as I typed their words. The lessons that they shared were myriad and complex, but today I want to distill out just 9 central motifs that arose. What do we learn when we listen to the earth?
One, all beings are sacred. In Yoruba cosmology, natural forces such as trees, rivers, birds, and hills are deities to be worshipped. There are at least 73 species of trees that are deified. According to Awise, Agbaye, Wande, Abimbola, there are forest areas called Ibo Etile, where no hunting is permitted, and Ilujugobofo, where only spiritual and magical activities are allowed. Islam honors the concepts of Tawhid, the oneness of God and creation, Ayat, the seeing of signs of God everywhere, being a steward of the earth, Khalifa, and living in balance with nature, Mizan. According to Ibrahim Abdul-Matin, the entire earth is a mosque. There is a unity of spirit and matter, and a sacredness imbued in all things. Nature and humans in constant prayer. Destroying nature silences voices of praise.
2, there is a covenant of moderation between species. All life on Earth shares a narrow band of habitability that extends from the deepest root systems of trees and the dark environment of ocean trenches up to the highest mountaintops. This layer, called the biosphere, is only about 12 miles from top to bottom, comprising only 0.3% of the planet's radius. We are tasked to share this tiny life raft with all beings. In the Yoruba sacred literature, the Odu, named Ogbeodi, offers a verse about the consequences of using excessive force in our relationships with other creatures on planet Earth. As the story goes, Mr. Byforce used deception to invite his friends, grasshopper, hen, wolf, dog, hyena, viper, walking stick, fire, rain, drought, and dewdrops, to a collective work gathering on his farm. Each one agreed on the condition that their sworn predatory enemy would not also be present. For example, Hen had a habit of trying to gobble up all of Grasshopper's children, and so Grasshopper wanted assurance that Hen would not be present. Hen wanted assurance that Wolf, who had attempted to devour all of her chicks, would not be invited, and so on. Not only did Mr. Byforce lie about his guest list, but he arranged his guests so that each would be working adjacent to their sworn enemy. He then withheld food and drink, such that the workers would become famished and desperate to eat. When they could not withstand their hunger any longer, they dropped their tools and pounced on one another, gnashing and biting. Fortunately, Dewdrops, the only one among them without an enemy, fell upon them all and brought coolness. Restored to their senses, they started to assist one another in rising to their feet. They embraced one another peacefully and discussed the need to make a new covenant. They agreed that rather than attempt to consume and eliminate all of the children of the other creatures, they would only eat what they absolutely needed. Their new covenant was one of moderation and mutual regard. In this verse, dewdrops are the manifestation of Orunmila Ifa, the Orisha connected to wisdom. The story ends, doing things by force has ruined the world of today. Dewdrops, come and make repairs. Dewdrops, come and make amends. According to the Awishe, we once lived in a serene and all-inclusive age of the world when humans and the rest of creation regarded themselves as brothers and sisters. This was known as Oba Jomi Jomi, the age of water. As society became more settled and populous, there came the age of Oba Jegi Jegi, the age of wood. This was a time of iron belonging to Ogun and associated with war, metal, manufacture, urbanism, and creativity. We are now in the age of Oba Jeyun Jeyun, the age of consumption, which is connected to industry, processed food, greed, and exploitation. If we are able to change our ways, the next and final age will be that of Oba Ero Ero, the age of the antidote, the age of healing.
3. Nature is cooperative and generous. Nature centers cooperation over competition more often than we are taught to believe. Mutualistic interactions are vital for the function of life on land. 80% of land species depend on mycorrhizal relationships with fungi to provide them with inorganic compounds and trace elements. The vast majority of tropical rainforest plants rely on animals to disperse their seeds. Mutualism has also been linked to major evolutionary events, such as symbiogenesis, the evolution of the eukaryotic cell, or the migration of plants onto land in collaboration with mycorrhizal fungi. Lichens are a symbiotic collaboration between algae and fungi, where the fungi supports the algae's survival in extreme conditions in exchange for sugar. Nitrogen fixation is only possible through an interkingdom mutualism between leguminous plants and rhizobial bacteria. Insect pollination, which we depend upon for 80% of human food crops, relies upon a relationship between flowering plants and insects. Humans would be unable to digest food without the 100 trillion microbes living in each of our guts, which outnumber the human cells in our body. Scientists are now arguing that the very concept of individual organism needs rethinking. Creatures help each other out. For example, ground squirrels, velvet monkeys, and prairie dogs cry out to warn their peers of predators, even though drawing attention to themselves increases their chances of being eaten. Ants and bees give their lives to protect their colonies. Birds that migrate in a V formation conserve their collective energy as compared to flying alone by riding the airflow of each other's wings.
4. Nature is queer and trans. At least 90% of flowering plants have hermaphroditic bisexual flowers that contain both male and female reproductive organs. The Dungawan bush tomato is sexually fluid, with its bright purple flowers alternating their sexual expression. Same-sex intimacy, including courtship, pair bonding, affectionate touch, intercourse, and parental activities have been documented in over 450 species of animals worldwide. Among birds, queer love has been seen in black swans, albatrosses, blue ducks, mallards, penguins, vultures, and pigeons. Mammals that regularly exhibit gay intimacy include Amazon dolphins, American bisons, 20 species of bats, bottlenose dolphins, elephants, giraffes, marmots, lions, polecats, bonobos, gorillas, Japanese macaques, orangutans, monkeys, sheep, and spotted hyenas. There are queer lizards and tortoises. Even insects, spiders, and dragonflies have same-sex relationships. Basically, the Earth is queer.
5. Nature does not hate. In an 1873 speech, Frederick Douglass remarked, "The grand old earth has no prejudice against race, color, or previous condition of servitude, but flings open her ample breasts to all who come to her for succor or relief." This remains true. In the face of racialized brutality, health crisis, or collective pain, Black people continue to go and lay down our burdens by the riverside. Nature has an endless capacity to compost our trauma into hope and receives each one of us as her child. Chris Bolden-Newsome hears the earth say, "I love you, and you are mine." Drew Lanham testified, "The land did not hate, only people did. Earth never judged or spat. Not a single cardinal or ovenbird has ever paused in dawn-song declaration to ask the reason for my being."
6. Our common languages are song and silence. Most of us still speak at least 2 of the Earth's languages, song and silence. We learn to sing from the earth. Birds use many of the same rhythmic variations, intervals, and combinations of notes that humans do. They follow the same scales, sing in canon, and even transpose their motifs into different keys. The ruby-crowned kinglet sings a full octave interval between the stanzas in their song. The canyon wren sings a chromatic scale, and the hermit thrush sings in a pentatonic scale. The California marsh wren communicates with its neighbors through call and response songs, employing a repertoire of over 120 fixed sequence themes. The songs of the Hutu and Tutsi people of Central East Africa incorporate the ultra-low frequency tones of elephants. Indigenous people living on Tana Island in Vanuatu created songs and dances based on the sounds of the active volcano, Mount Yasur. According to Toy Scott, the Buti people of the Congo deeply value silence. The forest is always talking, and the quiet pauses between sounds called the kimi are the source of peace, while noise, called the kami, is the source of conflict. Silence makes space for the wisdom of the ancestors, and that silence is a form of spirit speech. John Francis Planetwalker saw wisdom in silence. After witnessing the devastation caused by the 1971 oil spill off the coast of San Francisco, John Francis decided to give up motorized transport entirely, a commitment that he kept for 22 years. He additionally took up a vow of silence that lasted for 17 years, during which time he walked across the nation advocating for environmental protection and using his drawings and banjo playing as his means of communication. He earned a PhD in land management from the University of Wisconsin-Madison during this period of silence. And he was also employed by the U.S. Coast Guard, and he helped develop legislation on oil spill management, including the landmark Oil Spill Act of 1990. In Glory Land, Shelton Johnson wrote, quote, Wilderness is just a word. And the wind got no use for anything that come out our mouths except songs or prayers. Only then are we speaking from our hearts and are worth listening to. Otherwise, we should just be quiet and let the trees and sky do the talking. The wind's been talking since the world began, and I've been listening to it since I was born, and I ain't been bored yet.
Seven, land is the basis of freedom. At the dawn of emancipation in 1865, the Black community of Falls Church, Virginia, wrote to the Freedmen's Bureau saying, "We feel it very important that we obtain homes, owning our own shelters and the ground, that we may raise fruit trees concerning which our children can say, 'These are ours.'" This yearning for land in which to plant tree roots and to set down our own roots is enduring in the Black community. Yet land is about much more than growing food or even building a house. It's even about more than intergenerational wealth transfer. Land is a source of cultural continuity, ancestral belonging, self-determination, and the stability of home. According to Savvy Horn, there were emancipated freedmen who returned to the plantation because they found they could not live without a particular grove of trees. Despite once holding on to 16 million acres of land in the United States, nearly all of it has been wrenched from Black hands through government discrimination, white supremacist violence, erasure of the legacy of non-owning caretakers, and more recently, through disappearance under the rising coastal waters of climate change. The only real wealth is in the land. It's in the 5 gardens of Dr. Lanham's childhood, the home provisioning skills of Dr. Sorensen, the collared varieties saved by Mama Ira Wallace, and the Moruga Hill rice seed carried by Aaliyah Frazier. A litany of recent scientific studies have verified the long-term health value of traditional African diets, which are rich in leafy green vegetables, roots, tubers, legumes, and fermented whole grains. The goodness pulled from the soil. Land is health. Land is life. Secure land tenure, in other words, secure habitat, is a basic and universal right for all land-dwelling beings. As Malcolm X said, revolution is based on land. Land is the basis of all independence. Land is the basis of freedom, justice, and equality.
8, we can't breathe. While majestic rainforest trees often get all the credit for providing our oxygen in the atmosphere, the reality is that oceans are more aptly titled the lungs of the earth. Ocean creatures, mostly phytoplankton, produce over half the oxygen we rely upon to breathe. But the phytoplankton are struggling to breathe, declining by about 1% every year due to warming waters and depleted nutrient content. They are not the only ones gasping for air. Black and brown people are disproportionately choked by COVID and wildfires, washed away by hurricanes. According to Kendra Pierre-Louis, we have gone numb to mass death. The first few hundred deaths raise alarm, but the millionth does not even make the news. Eric Garner cried out 11 times, "I can't breathe." Who was listening? Ross Gay wrote, "A small needful fact is that Eric Garner worked for some time for the Parks and Rec Horticultural Department, which means, perhaps, that with his very large hands, perhaps in all likelihood, he put gently into the earth some plants which, most likely, some of them, in all likelihood, continue to grow, continue to do what such plants do, like house and feed small and necessary creatures, like being pleasant to touch and to smell, like converting sunlight into food, like making it easier for all of us to breathe.
Nine, we are kin. We are often taught that our dignity comes from setting ourselves apart from earthly beings, better than and apart from the animals and plants. But Dr. Joshua Bennett sees it differently. He said, quote, "Black lives, as those that are often positioned as outside of the human-animal divide altogether and placed elsewhere in a zone of non-being, where the kinds of extravagant violence so often deployed against and solely reserved for animals is made allowable, deemed necessary in order for white society to function at peak performance. The animals are my kin, my truest kin, since we all belong to the earth. The lie of whiteness is that we can separate ourselves from the earth. And considering animals as co-laborers, friends, and partners in the field, Black people resisted a social order predicated on confinement and opened to a more radical sociality grounded in the desire for a world without cages or chains. It follows that police and prison abolition has environmentalist roots, viewing human life as part of all life on Earth. If this is to be true, then the degradation of the Earth is a manifestation of self-hatred, and the regeneration of the Earth is a manifestation of self-love.
What if we could see us the way the divine body of the earth sees us? What if we learned to love and emulate our elder siblings, the hawks, black bear, and wolves, in a practice of sacred biomimicry? In summary, we have heard that earth listening involves rehydrating 3 habits of mind: earth as text, earth as kin, and earth as teacher. This practice is both ancestral and futuristic. Just as the scientific method is used time and again for novel experiments, these core methodologies of earth listening provide a framework for innovation. Afro-indigeneity is a modern and continually evolving practice. We each have a role to play.
We can deepen our own practice of earth listening by learning how to read the earth once again, starting with the names of our beyond human kin, moving on to tree rings, weather patterns, soil structure, and bird song. We can also give away resources and power to Black and Indigenous-led ecological projects. Organizations like Taproot Earth, Girl Trek, Outdoor Afro, Urban Ocean Lab, Rise St. James, and National Black Food and Justice Alliance. On the systems front, we need to support #LandBack, take a stand for reparations, and advocate for rights of nature policy. The learning journey is lifelong, so start diving into Black and Indigenous eco-literature today. Starting with Unbowed, All We Can Save, and As Long as the Grass Grows. Here's a whole list of Black eco projects and media you can check out.
In this time, we are acutely aware of the fractures in our system of runaway consumption and corporate insatiability. We feel the hot winds of wildfire, the disruptions of pandemic, and the choked breath of the victims of state violence. We know there is no going back to normal. The path forward demands that we take our rightful places as the younger siblings in creation, deferring to the oceans, forest, and mountains as our teachers. We will close with a poem by my womb and soul sister, Leah Penniman, who also created the cover painting for Black Earth Wisdom.
Mama Nature told me, I am part of you. You are part of me. When we forgot, she remembered us. When we were lost, she found us. Mama Nature told me we have more than enough to go around. She showed me a glowing paper birch on the edge of the forest on a south-facing slope, endowed to grow twice as big. With all the sunlight it could ever drink, it could tower over, shade out the rest. It disperses its surplus sugars to boost the other trees instead. Could we be like that? Let go of excess, practice fair distribution of sustenance, regardless of what slope we were born on. Mama Nature taught me we are stronger together. She showed me the interspecies marriage of algae and fungi who fell in love across kingdoms, birthed a new life form, capable of making home on stone, adept at staying alive in the harshest conditions. Could we be like that? Join forces across difference, weave our powers, individual but undividable, in the midst of unthinkable circumstances, learn how to flourish together. Mama Nature taught me Blackness is precious and must be respected and must be protected from artificial light and must be tended. She showed me the indigo night, the miracle of starlight, the deep, dark ocean, the rich black soils brimming with life. Mama Nature taught me nothing and no one is disposable. It all goes back to the cycle. She showed me there is no such thing as a way. Not for our waste heaped high in landfills or amassing in the Pacific, not for our people deemed throwaway, warehoused in cages and open-air prisons. There is no escaping the totality of this single beating earth. There is no mistaking. All of us belong. Mama Nature told me, you are made of the same matter as stardust. Remember your connection to everything. She showed me this animate force of existence pulsing all around us, doing everything in its power to regenerate life, even in death. She showed me a hollowed out tree, still standing, long dead, a hatchery for starlings, a porcupine den, a perch for owls, a hideout for bats, a food cache for chipmunks, a nuthatch's nest. Could we feel our ancestors' love like that? Palpable and present all around us, sheltering and nourishing us, supporting our flourishing. Could we be eternal? Mama Nature taught me death energizes life. Life necessitates death. She showed me cypress seeds enclosed in cones, sealed shut with resin, the hardened shell, the trapped potential, the awakening flame, the wild inferno, the melting walls, the bursting open, the smoky wind, the scattered soaring, the free fall flight to fresh, warm soil, the open sky, the widened space to grow and grow and grow. Could we be like that? Rising from devastation, preparing the way for the next stage of thriving. Mama Nature taught me transformation is inevitable, adaptation is essential, change creates openings. She showed me how dolphins evolved dorsal fins to withstand the wild movement of the ocean, how plants befriended fungi who helped them migrate out of water, who taught them how to grow roots, who showed them how to survive on scorched land, until together They transformed the atmosphere, built soil over stone, and patiently, unmistakably changed the entire world. Could we be like that? Work together to do the unthinkable and shift the course of destiny. Mama Nature asked me, what will be your contribution? How will you partner with renewal to usher evolution? What are you willing to let go of? How are you willing to grow? Will you remember you are intrinsic to something bigger? What will you give rise to with the life force you've been given? Mama Nature asked me, can you hear me? And are you listening?